Picture this. You stumble out of bed one sticky summer morning in 1940, probably half asleep, maybe a little grumpy, and then, bam. The sky isn't blue, it's just swarming with enemy planes. Like a scene out of some nightmare, except way too real. Engines scream overhead, bombs thud in the distance, and your whole street, the one where you used to play cricket or gossip with your neighbors, is suddenly total chaos. Sirens wail, people scatter, and everything familiar turns upside down. Welcome to the Battle of Britain, where millions of regular folks woke up smack in the middle of history. Kinda makes you wonder, how the hell did it come to this? Why was Britain suddenly left holding the bag staring down Nazi Germany all alone? So, it's 1940. And, honestly, the world's still reeling from the blitzkrieg that Hitler just unleashed. In a handful of months, Germany steamrolled Poland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Norway. Just one after the other, snap, snap, snap. It was like watching dominoes fall, except way scarier. Europe's on fire, and Britain's stuck on its island, separated from the madness by nothing but the Channel. Hitler figured the Brits would fold. He thought they'd see the writing on the wall and just give up. But then you've got Winston Churchill, bulldog in a bow tie, popping up with his gravelly voice promising to fight on beaches, fields, streets, hills, you name it. Surrender? Not in this guy's vocabulary. But let's be real. Britain's situation was wobbly at best. Sure, the Royal Navy's still bossing the seas, but the Luftwaffe? They own the sky over Europe. Hitler's got this plan, Operation Sea Lion, where he wants to send his troops across the Channel. But first, he's got to wipe out the RAF. No air superiority, no invasion. Suddenly, the fields and clouds over southern England become the place where everything's riding on the line. Over in the RAF, you've got Hugh Dowding running the show. The dude's sharp. He knows they can't just outmuscle the Germans. So he goes for brains over brawn, better strategy, tighter teamwork, cooler tech. Fighter command splits into groups, each one guarding its own turf. But the real secret sauce? Radar. The Chain Home system, this web of radar towers along the coast, could spot incoming planes from 120 miles out. That gives the RAF just enough time to get their Spitfires and Hurricanes off the ground and into the fight. It's like an early warning system before early warning systems were cool. But, hey, gadgets only get you so far. At the end of the day, it's about guts. Those RAF pilots, tiny in number, massive in spirit. Guys like John Cunningham, Douglas Bader, and James Ginger Lacey. Some became legends, others stayed unsung heroes. Their days were a wild mix of nail-biting drills, constant missions, and the very real chance they wouldn't live to see tomorrow. They kept going anyway. Churchill called them the few, and honestly, understatement of the century. Meanwhile, across the Channel, the Luftwaffe's gearing up, lining up fighters and bombers that already chewed up France. Their plan: hit the RAF hard, smash the airfields and radar towers, grind down resistance. This first round, Kanalkampf they called it, turns the sky into an insane mess of dogfights and bombing runs. RAF pilots barely get a breather, just enough time to slap some duct tape on their planes, refuel, and dive back into the mayhem. And while all this is happening, regular people, absolutely battered. Cities like London, Coventry, and Liverpool get pummeled, not just to knock out factories, but to break everyone's spirit. Didn't work, though. Folks huddled in shelters, joked through the blackouts, and figured out how to survive one more night. You'd hear about firefighters sprinting into burning buildings, medics patching people up in the rubble, neighbors sharing what little they had. The whole country, somehow, refusing to just roll over. Stiff upper lip, blitz spirit. Call it what you want, but damn, they pulled it off. Honestly, the Luftwaffe kind of shot itself in the foot. They totally blew it on British radar. Thought the RAF would just stay down for the count, then, brilliant move here, started bombing cities instead of hitting airfields and radar stations. That gave the RAF room to breathe, scramble, patch up, and come back swinging. By the end of August rolling into September, the Brits were locked and loaded, ready to give the Luftwaffe a proper kicking. Then you get to September 15th, Battle of Britain Day. Absolute chaos in the skies. Hundreds of German planes shot down, and suddenly Hitler's big invasion plans? Yeah, on ice, maybe forever. Britain didn't win because they were bigger or stronger. They won with guts, brains, and some seriously clever tech. But the real magic of the Battle of Britain? It's not just about planes and dogfights. It's the sheer stubbornness of the people. You had pilots running on pure adrenaline, sometimes flying 3-4 sorties a day, mechanics barely sleeping, patching up Spitfires and Hurricanes with whatever they could find. Meanwhile, regular folks just trying to live their lives with bombs dropping all around. Churchill called them the few, but it took a whole country holding its nerve. The fight wasn't just up in the clouds. It was about holding on to your way of life, your home, and that little thing called freedom. So yeah, this is where things get epic. The whole chapter kicks off with panic in the streets, Nazi bombers overhead, and a country that looked like it might buckle. Except it didn't. What happened next is a mashup of genius, guts, and a bit of luck, plus the kind of everyday heroism that movies love to rip off. As we dive deeper, you're going to see all the details. The wild tactics, the pilots, the gear, every close call and desperate gamble. Every piece mattered. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. That's why people still talk about the Battle of Britain like it's the stuff of legend. Back in 1940, the sky over Britain was more than just a battleground. It was a test. Everyone got thrown in. The aces, the ground crews, the bombed-out families. Every siren, every scramble, every dogfight was a moment where history could have tipped the other way. This is the story of a sky lit up with fire, and a nation that just refused to fold, even when the smart money said they should. Europe in chaos. Picture this. It's summer 1940, and Europe's gone completely bonkers. The map's getting redrawn overnight by Nazi Germany, and everyone's freaked out. Hitler's on a rampage, ripping up the old rule book with his mix of wild new tactics and pure, unfiltered aggression. If you want to get why Britain ended up fighting solo, you gotta see just how much the world got turned upside down in a matter of months. The roller coaster really starts in 1939. Hitler, riding high on his own hype and everyone else's failed appeasement, goes full villain and blitzes Poland. Boom, Poland's crushed in weeks, and suddenly everyone's talking about blitzkrieg. That's just German for lightning war, by the way. Fast tanks, planes screaming overhead, coordinated attacks that just steamroll the old-school defenders. The world's jaw drops as the supposedly tough armies of Europe get flattened like yesterday's leftovers. Britain and France, Poland's supposed buddies, declare war. But let's be real, their opening move is mostly paperwork and waiting around. They call it the phony war for a reason. While the Allies twiddled their thumbs, Hitler was already plotting his next move. April 1940. Germany steamrolls Denmark and Norway before you can say, where's the Navy? Denmark folds in a day, Norway hangs on a bit longer, but not much. Suddenly, Germany's got prime real estate, control of the North Sea, and Britain's shipping lanes are looking a little sketchy. It's a flex, and the rest of Europe gets the message. The German war machine is not messing around. But the real sucker punch? May 1940, when Hitler lets loose on France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The blitzkrieg just blows right past the impenetrable Maginot Line, thanks for nothing, French generals, and hits through the Ardennes, which everyone thought was too rough for tanks. Wrong. German panzers roll in, Allies get boxed in, and suddenly it's a mad dash evacuation at Dunkirk. Governments collapse, soldiers get rounded up by the thousands, and the whole continent's left shell-shocked. Yeah, it was a mess. And right there, in all that chaos, Britain's left standing alone, staring down the biggest bully the world's ever seen. You want drama? Dunkirk's got it all. Picture this. Over 338,000 Allied troops stranded on a beach, basically waiting for doom, and then, bam! A ragtag fleet of Navy ships, fishing boats, and random little steamers shows up and snatches them right out from under the Germans' noses. Yeah, it was gutsy as hell, but let's not kid ourselves. It also screamed just how wrecked Europe's defenses were. Germany blitzed through the continent so fast everyone's heads were spinning. France? gone by June 1940. One day they're holding the line. Next thing you know, they're signing surrender papers and splitting the country in two. Germans up north, puppet government, Vichy, down south. It freaked everyone out. Britain, especially, was suddenly sitting alone at the table, with a hungry wolf eyeing its last slice of pie. The Channel was all that stood between the UK and a full-on Nazi house party, and the Luftwaffe, well, they owned the skies over France. Not exactly comforting. Other countries? Yeah, good luck. Belgium, Netherlands, Norway, rolled over, occupied, and forced to either play ball with the Nazis or get crushed. Underground resistance popped up everywhere. But let's be honest, it was David versus Goliath, and Goliath was juiced. Hitler's whole New Europe dream was looking a little too real, and everyone kept glancing over at Britain, wondering if it was next on the menu. Britain, man, talk about pressure. Outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of the fight. Churchill just took over as PM by Chamberlain, and he got it. Survival wasn't just about tanks and Spitfires. It was about keeping people fired up. Those speeches? Legendary. We shall fight on the beaches, and all that jazz. Guy knew how to rally a crowd, make them believe they could take on the whole world if they had to. Europe at this point? Pure anxiety. Germany was steamrolling everything. Cities occupied, governments toppled, people living in constant dread. It felt like nothing could stop the Nazis. But weirdly, Britain's lonely stand almost became a rallying point. Like, hey, maybe all isn't lost just yet. They had radar, gutsy pilots, and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Maybe that'd be enough. And then there was the whole global chessboard. The U.S.? Still pretending to be neutral, but starting to slip Britain a few supplies on the sly. Lend-lease, anyone? Soviet Union? Playing nice with Germany for now, but who knew how long that would last? Italy jumped in with Germany, stirring up trouble in Africa and the Med. Basically, the world was teetering on the edge, and Britain was the last big domino still standing in Europe. Hitler figured he could smash Britain with planes and mind games, Operation Sea Lion and all that. He thought bombing cities would break people's spirits. But, plot twist, he totally underestimated just how stubborn the British could be. Turns out, inventiveness and sheer cussedness go a long way when someone's trying to wipe you off the map. So that's the mood right before the Battle of Britain kicked off. Europe's a mess, Nazis everywhere, and Britain's hanging on by its fingernails. But they're not out yet. Every pilot, every mechanic, every grandma making tea, everyone's got skin in this game. And what happens next? Well, let's just say history's about to get loud. This context sets the stage for the Battle of Britain itself. Europe had been thrown into chaos, with entire nations subjugated or under threat. Britain faced the daunting task of defending itself alone, with the fate of its empire, culture, and freedom hanging in the balance. The lessons from the collapse of France, the evacuation at Dunkirk, and the rapid expansion of Nazi control made it clear that Britain had no margin for error. Every pilot, every radar operator, every mechanic, and every citizen would play a role in the struggle that was about to unfold. The story of Britain in 1940 is therefore not just a military narrative, but a tale of resilience, courage, and determination in the face of a continent-wide crisis. The chaos of Europe had created the conditions for one of the most famous and decisive battles in history, a battle in which the skies themselves became the ultimate battlefield. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the world watched as Britain prepared to defend itself against the might of Nazi Germany. Preparing for defense, Britain's last stand. By mid-1940, Britain faced an existential threat. After the fall of France, Hitler's gaze turned across the Channel. Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, required air superiority, and the Luftwaffe believed they could achieve it quickly. The task for the Royal Air Force, RAF, was clear but daunting: defend the skies at all costs. All right, let's shake off the robot vibes and get into it. So picture this. Summer 1940, Britain's basically standing alone. staring down the barrel of a German invasion. France just folded like a cheap lawn chair, and now it's just the Brits left. No backup, unless you count wishful thinking. Hitler's feeling cocky after steamrolling everyone, and he figures, hey, I'll just bomb them into quitting. His whole plan, Operation Sea Lion, hinges on the Luftwaffe smashing the RAF so badly that crossing the channel doesn't turn into a suicide mission. Spoiler, didn't quite work out for him, but it was close. The RAF, under Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, the guy had nerves of steel, didn't exactly have planes and men to burn, so they had to be smart, like really smart. Fighter Command split itself into 3 main groups. First up, number 11 Group. Those poor souls had to defend southeast England, including London. It was basically the front porch, and the Germans kept knocking. Then there's number 12 Group. Their job? Cover the Midlands and East Anglia. Think of them as the emergency backup. When number 11 needed help, these guys scrambled. Finally, number 10 Group watched over the southwest. Not as glamorous, but crucial for holding the line and jumping in when things went sideways. Here's the wild card, radar. Britain had this setup called chain home. Coastal stations could spot German planes up to 120 miles away. This wasn't just some nifty gadget. It was a total game changer. Pilots got precious minutes to get airborne, and those minutes meant everything. But the whole operation was like an orchestra. If the mechanics, ground crews, and command centers didn't work in sync, the music, or, the defense, fell apart. Every day, these pilots, most of them barely old enough to drink, were flying endless sorties. You'd see them come back with planes, looking like Swiss cheese, totally running on fumes and adrenaline. It wasn't just the flying that was rough. Fuel was running low, engines were always on the verge of giving up, and death was just a regular part of the job description. Meanwhile, mechanics and ground crews were basically living at the airfields, fixing up battered Hurricanes and Spitfires under blackout conditions, hoping the next raid didn't blow them sky high. And it wasn't just the military in the trenches. Civilians chipped in big time. Air raid shelters, blackout curtains, volunteering for anything and everything. Britain was basically running on community grit. Bombs dropped, people dug in. That's just how it was. The Luftwaffe started out hitting RAF airfields, radar stations, and factories. Precision stuff, trying to cripple Britain's defenses. Sometimes they managed to land a punch, but the RAF just kept switching things up, using backup airfields, patching up runways, even tricking the Germans with dummy targets. Flexibility wasn't just helpful, it was the reason they didn't get wiped out. By August 1940, the gloves were off. Hundreds of German bombers with fighter escorts came roaring in over the channel every single day. The skies above southern England turned into a deadly circus of dogfights. Spitfires and Hurricanes against Messerschmitts and Heinkels. It was chaos. Some pilots, like Douglas Bader, James Lacey, John Cunningham, became household names. Sometimes a single madman would shoot down a bunch of German planes in one go and come back like it was just another Tuesday. The real turning point? September 15th, 1940, Battle of Britain Day. Luftwaffe threw everything at London, but thanks to radar and some slick coordination, the RAF sent them packing. Dozens of German planes went down in flames. After that, Hitler started having second thoughts about invading. Operation Sea Lion? Yeah, that went straight to the back burner. Meanwhile, life on the ground was anything but normal. Bombs rained down, cities burned, but people kept going. Firefighters, medics, volunteers, everyone pulling their weight. Churchill's speeches were everywhere, and the message was clear. Nah, we're not giving up. Long story short, Britain's defense wasn't just about the guys in the cockpits. It was a full team effort, from the radar operators to the kids hiding under the kitchen table. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. A critical technological advantage for Britain was the chain-home radar system, a network of early warning stations along the coast. Capable of detecting incoming aircraft up to 120 miles away, radar gave RAF controllers valuable minutes to scramble fighters and intercept German formations. Unlike Germany, which relied primarily on visual spotting and intelligence reports, Britain had the unprecedented ability to see the enemy before they arrived. Man, even with all those perks, the RAF still got slammed with some gnarly problems. First off, they just didn't have enough planes. Like, you can't win a fight with empty hangars, right? And flying one of those things wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Pilots needed ages to learn how to handle those wild, high-speed dogfights the Germans loved to start. Hurricanes and Spitfires. Yeah, the legendary duo. Totally rocked, but geez, they were divas when it came to maintenance. Mechanics and ground crews basically lived at the airfields, wrenching away all night, sometimes in pitch-black conditions, 'cause, nobody wanted to give Nazi recon planes a free light show. Every single mission was a giant headache. Fuel, bullets, engines, mess any of that up, and someone's not coming home. And let's be real, getting those fresh-faced pilots ready, that was a nightmare too. Most of these kids were barely out of school, and suddenly they're cramming navigation, gunnery, formation flying, and all sorts of what to do when your plane's on fire drills. Sure, they'd get some practice in classrooms or on simulators, but honestly, nothing teaches you like having a Messerschmitt on your tail for real. Some guys, like Douglas Bader, yeah, the dude with no legs, seriously, still went up and fought like absolute legends. Guts like that? You can't teach it. But it wasn't just about daredevil pilots and shiny planes. The whole game changed because of this wild setup called the doubting system. Picture radar, spotters, mountains of phone lines, and command rooms all stitched together, like something out of a crazy steampunk movie. Controllers sat there glued to radar screens, barking orders and steering squadrons into just the right spot, saving fuel and ammo for when it really mattered. Nobody else on the planet had their act together like that back then. And, oh man, the regular folks, they were in it up to their necks. Blackouts everywhere. Whole cities plunged into darkness to confuse enemy bombers. Volunteers hustled in shelters and fire crews, while factories just never slept, churning out plane parts and bombs for the boys up top. Women? Total MVPs. Running the show in munitions plants, nursing, doing whatever needed doing, including the WAAF. Honestly, it felt like the whole country was on the team, whether you wore overalls or a uniform. Can't forget the morale game, Churchill's speeches, pure fire. The guy could make you want to punch a Messerschmitt with your bare hands. Never surrender, he'd say, and people actually believed it. It wasn't just empty hype, it was the thread holding everyone together when it looked like things might just fall apart. That kind of mental toughness? Worth its weight in Spitfires. Meanwhile, Göring and the Luftwaffe tried to wipe Britain's air force off the map. They went after airfields, radar, factories, anything that kept the RAF flying. Bombers rolled in with fighter escorts, trying to break British spirits. But the RAF just kept dodging and adapting. If an airfield got blasted, squadrons would just move somewhere else. Runways got patched mid-attack, fake airfields popped up to mess with the Germans, and busted planes got taped up and shoved back in the fight. Honestly, flexibility became their secret weapon. The grind was unreal. Pilots sometimes flew so many sorties in a day they could probably land their plane with their eyes closed. Not recommended, by the way. Planes came back shot to hell, ground crews patched them up, and radar operators basically stared at screens until their eyeballs screamed. Everyone hustled, everyone mattered. The whole messy, heroic machine somehow worked, squeezing every last drop out of what they had to stand up to a bigger, nastier enemy. And tactics? These guys weren't idiots. Hit and run was the name of the game. Zip in, trash a bomber, get out before you get swarmed. Spitfires were the hot rods. Fast, nimble, deadly. Hurricanes? Tough as boots, and easier to fix if you bent one. Pilots learned to cover each other, fly smart, and team up for smackdowns that made the Germans think twice. Bottom line, the RAF didn't just survive. They made the Luftwaffe bleed for every inch. Every element of Britain's defense, technology, strategy, training, logistics, and morale, was interdependent. A failure in one could have led to catastrophic consequences. But the integration of these components created a resilient system, capable of absorbing the initial shock of German attacks and adapting in real time. It was a system built not only on machines and weapons, but on courage, coordination, and determination. By the end of the summer of 1940, Britain was ready. Fighter command had dispersed, pilots were trained and experienced, radar stations were operational, and civilians were prepared for the hardships of air raids. Britain in 1940? Man, talk about backs against the wall. France had just crumbled like a wet paper bag, and suddenly all eyes, well, Hitler's mostly, were locked on the UK Operation Sea Lion. That was the big, bad invasion plan. Only catch? The Germans needed to own the skies first. Without air superiority, any invasion was basically a suicide mission. So the job of keeping Britain in the fight landed on the RAF. Outnumbered and outgunned, sure, but absolutely not outclassed. Dowding's crew, more than just pilots. So here's the deal. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding wasn't just sitting around clutching his pearls. The guy put together a legit defense system, dividing up the country into chunks. No 11 Group got London and the southeast, basically the bullseye for German bombs. Number 12 Group was the backup squad in central England, and Number 10 Group held down the southwest, covering places like Bristol. Smart, right? Spread the pain around. But the real game changer? Radar. The chain-home system could spot German planes coming from over 100 miles away. That's like, well, really far. Radar operators would spot the incoming swarms, and then the observer corps, regular folks with binoculars and nerves of steel, would keep tabs visually. The whole setup let the RAF scramble fighters at just the right moment. Not too early, not too late. Honestly, it was a bit like a giant, high-stakes video game. Rookie pilots, legends in the making. The RAF wasn't exactly rolling in veteran pilots. Most were barely old enough to shave, let alone dogfight with seasoned Luftwaffe aces. Training was brutal and quick. Navigation, formation flying, shooting, all that jazz. If you messed up, you probably didn't get a second shot. Some pilots became legends. Douglas Bader, flying with 2 prosthetic legs. Seriously, the guy was unstoppable. Or John Cunningham, the night fighter ace. They flew Spitfires and Hurricanes. The Spitfire? Sexy, nimble, built for dogfights. The Hurricane? Tough as old boots, easy to patch up after catching a few holes. Every time those pilots took off, it was a roll of the dice. And none of it worked without ground controllers, radar techs, mechanics, the whole invisible army on the ground. Luftwaffe turns up the heat. Hermann Göring and his Luftwaffe rolled in thinking they'd smash the RAF in a couple weeks. First, they went after airfields, radar towers, and factories. If you knock out the foundations, the house falls, right? So hundreds of bombers and fighters poured over the channel every day. Heinkel He-111s, Dornier Doe 17s, Messerschmitt Bf 109s, you name it. Except the Brits weren't playing along. Radar gave them the edge. Squadrons would swoop in just in time, over and over, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. And even when airfields took a beating, repair crews patched runways up faster than you'd believe. The sky above southern England turned into this insane, swirling dogfight. Bullets, engines, guts, and adrenaline. Life on the edge? For the pilots, life was a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. Long hours, barely a wink of sleep, and always that buzzing in your brain. Will I make it back this time? Mechanics worked by torchlight, patching up bullet holes while bombs whistled overhead. Radar techs, radio operators, the whole crew, they kept the machine running, even if nobody saw their faces in the papers. Meanwhile, regular folks weren't exactly chilling either. Air raid sirens, blackouts, sleeping in shelters. You couldn't escape the war. Cities like London and Coventry got hammered. But people adapted. Firefighters, nurses, volunteers, just plain neighbors. They kept things moving, patching up wounds and putting out fires, literal and otherwise. Schools ran in basements, hospitals moved underground, and somehow life went on. Brits just kept calm and carried on, stiff upper lip and all that. And that, honestly, might have been their secret weapon. The turning point, Battle of Britain Day, September 15th, 1940, became a defining moment, later celebrated as Battle of Britain Day. The Luftwaffe launched a massive assault on London, hoping to break civilian morale and eliminate RAF resistance. Yet the RAF, using radar intelligence and strategic deployment of squadrons, successfully intercepted the attackers. Dozens of German bombers and fighters were shot down. The failure forced Hitler to postpone Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. Britain had survived, not merely by luck, but through strategy, courage, and collective effort. The Blitz and shifting tactics. After failing to achieve air superiority, the Luftwaffe shifted to night bombing raids, targeting cities in what became known as the Blitz. London, Birmingham, Coventry, and other cities faced devastating attacks, causing massive civilian casualties and destruction. Man, the Battle of Britain wasn't just a bunch of planes dogfighting over the channel. It was an all-out, full-throttle test of guts. Picture it. Pilots scrambling over and over, sometimes flying 3-4 times in a day. Guys limping back to base with busted-up Spitfires, maybe bleeding, barely landing, and then just grabbing another helmet and going right back up. Ground crews? Absolute legends. Fixing shot-up planes while bombs are raining down? That's nerves of steel. And it wasn't just the military. Londoners huddled in the tube during air raids, firefighters dragging hoses through burning neighborhoods, factory workers churning out plane parts on zero sleep. Everybody was in it together, from the radar gals spotting blips on a screen to the kid delivering milk through shattered streets. By October 1940, the Germans had thrown everything they had at Britain and still couldn't break it. The RAF kept flying, the lights stayed on, well, mostly, and Hitler was left sulking with his invasion plans in the bin. The thing is, Britain didn't win because it had more planes or pilots. Far from it. It was brains, hustle, and a stubborn refusal to quit. Churchill called the pilots the few, and honestly, they became instant legends. The whole country kind of grabbed onto that hope and just hung on for dear life. Hitler's first loss? Yeah, it stung. Turns out unity, a bit of cleverness, and some old-fashioned British stubbornness can throw even the biggest bully off his game. Britain didn't just luck into this win, either. They'd been training like mad, building up radar, setting up air raid shelters, organizing everything down to the last tea kettle. What looked like weakness became their secret weapon. Nobody expected them to be that organized, that tough. The Battle of Britain isn't just a war story. It's proof. When people dig deep and have each other's backs, they can survive anything. Seriously, it's almost like the plot of an underdog sports movie, just with more explosions. So, rewind to summer 1940, Britain's in a tight spot. France has fallen, Nazi flags all over Europe, and suddenly that little stretch of water between Dover and Calais feels very, very thin. Hitler is feeling pretty smug. He wants Operation Sea Lion, an invasion of Britain. But first, he needs the Luftwaffe to wipe the RAF off the map. No air superiority, no invasion, simple as that. So it's up to the RAF, a sort of scrappy underdog, to hold the line. Now, the RAF wasn't some ragtag mess. They had brains behind the scenes. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding ran a tight ship. He didn't just throw pilots at the problem. He organized the defense by zones. Number 11 Group, Southeast, including London, basically, please bomb me, Central. Number 12 Group, Central England and backup. And Number 10 Group, the West and reserves. The real secret sauce? The Dowding system. This wasn't just radar, though those chain-home radar towers were wild for the time. It was a whole network. Spotters, radio chatter, radar blips, all piped into control rooms, so squadrons knew exactly when and where to scramble. No wasted fuel, no wasted lives. Dowding was a bit of a wizard, honestly. Instead of big, clumsy formations like the Germans, he kept things nimble. Small groups, quick strikes, always moving. The Germans kept getting caught off guard. and it drove them nuts. Let's talk about the pilots. These guys, most of them barely out of school, some with only a handful of flying hours, jumped into the cockpit against battle-hardened Luftwaffe aces. Training was brutal. Gunnery, formation flying, navigation, emergency drills. They'd fly until they couldn't see straight. And the stories? Douglas Bader, who flew with tin legs and still outmaneuvered just about anyone. John Cat's Eyes Cunningham, who could pick out bombers in the pitch black. Real-life superheroes. The RAF's main punch came from two planes, the Spitfire, sleek, fast, sexy in the air, and the Hurricane, a bit chunkier but tough as nails and easier to fix. Every flight was a gamble. Split-second decisions, relying on ground controllers barking orders, trusting your wingman not to botch a turn. Some days you came back. Some days you didn't. That's the brutal truth. Anyway, the Battle of Britain was